Is this where I have to be like the pastor and tell everybody in church to come forward from the back? There's more Jesus up this way than there is in the back of the room. I married somebody once.
As the mayor?
No, no, we filled out some paperwork and I ominous them and now they're married.
You don't have to be a religious person to marry someone. Anyone can marry anyone in Alaska. You just get that little certificate.
As witnessed by me, anybody. Well, it is 6 o'clock. I'm sure no one else has anything else going on tonight or wanting to get out of here. So we'll go ahead and get this meeting started. I call to order the special meeting of Thursday, April 18th, 2024. Please join me for a flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The city and borough of Sitka would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional first people of Sitka. With gratitude, we proceed on Tlingit Ani. Sarah, roll call, please.
Mayor Eisenbeis,
Present.
Mr. Mosier,
Here.
Mr. Pike,
Here.
Mr. Christensen,
Here.
Ms. Carlson,
Here.
Mr. Celine,
Here.
and Mr. Yestad should be here momentarily.
Thank you. Any correspondence or agenda changes this evening? Seeing none, that'll bring us to persons to be heard. This is public participation for any item off of tonight's agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes for any individual. Seeing none, that'll bring us to our new business item tonight. So tonight we're gathered for a discussion direction decision of the administrator's draft budget. So tonight is going to be anything with the budget. If we have any changes anywhere on the budget, it's all free game tonight. However, I know that John and Melissa do have a bit of a presentation for us, so we'll start there. John.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I hand it over to Melissa to give the presentation, I just wanted to put kind of our budget in context here, since we are getting close to the end. So as we get closer to finalizing this year's budget, it's important to recognize the fortunate position we find ourselves in thanks to increased sales tax revenues. This boost has enabled us to fund several, I'll call nice to have programs, which have undoubtedly enhanced our community's quality of life. However, our discussions cannot ignore the ongoing debates concerning ballot initiatives aimed at limiting tourism. It's my firm belief that the consideration of any such initiative would almost inevitably lead to complex and costly legal challenges. Potential litigants could include local businesses, the travel industry, land leaseholders, and even our own citizens, each contesting the outcomes these initiatives might bring. The financial ramifications of such litigation are significant, as these expenses are unlikely to be covered by insurance, but will instead require direct allocations from our general fund. This reality necessitates a thorough review of our current spending, including beloved programs and projects such as our Parks and Rec program, the Blatchley Pool, Performing Arts Center funding, and various minor paving and deferred maintenance projects. We need to consider the possibility of discontinuing these initiatives should we need to redirect funds to cover litigation costs. As we consider the implications of potential ballot initiatives on our community, whether they pass or not, I want to assure you all that I will return to the Assembly to discuss and assess our financial strategy in detail. We will need to evaluate the impact of these initiatives on our budget and consider potential cuts to ensure our financial health. This proactive approach will prepare us to handle any outcome responsibly, maintaining the stability and well-being of our community. So with that, I'd like to have everybody keep that in mind, and then we'll pass it off to Melissa to start the presentation.
Okay, so today, in prior years, we've had separate meetings to go over our internal service funds and our enterprise funds. Those meetings tend to go pretty quickly, so we are looking to do that today in one meeting. So we'll be reviewing the budgets, really focusing on the impact that budget has on the long-term health of the fund. And we're looking at enterprise funds, internal service funds, which act like enterprise funds that only serve the rest of the city, and then all of our other governmental funds. We also, we spent quite a lot of time on our last meeting discussing the general fund budget. I implemented all of the changes that you made at that meeting, and I wanted to bring those forward so we can talk about our new bottom line and then nail down any other changes that the assembly might want. The goal of today's meeting is to really finalize the budget. It takes a great deal of work to put the whole budget package together, so we really want to get it, all of the numbers that you want in there finalized before we publish that draft budget and bring it forward for first reading. We can also decide if any other meetings are needed. If we can't finish everything tonight, that's fine, and we can set another meeting. We still have enough time to do that. And then right now, our schedule has us going through first and second reading of the budget ordinance, May 14th and 28th. Just a reminder, by code, it has to be, we have to go through the second reading of a budget ordinance 10 days prior to the end of the fiscal year, or whatever the draft budget is that's out there is officially adopted. So we'll start with the enterprise funds, and so we have electric, water, wastewater, solid waste, all of our utilities. We have our harbor fund, and then Airport Marine Service Center and the Gary Paxton Industrial Park. Again, the focus of this is looking at the impact of the budget on working capital. So really, what does that do to the long-term funds that are available for each fund? And all of the decisions around budget and rates have been made by looking at our fiscal models and looking at the long-term financial health of the fund. So for electric fund, we have fairly significant capital needs coming up in the near future. That's what our fiscal model was based on. Just to note the numbers you're looking at, we did receive the $2 million incentive payment in FY24, I believe just last week. So those are not in the working capital levels that you're looking at. They weren't. And just a note, all of the FY24 assumes that our budgeted revenue and expenses come to fruition exactly as they were budgeted. Oftentimes, our revenues might be flat. They're not usually under. They might meet budget or beat budget, and our expenses are usually below. But in this case, our revenue and our FY24 projected working capital will be $2 million higher than what we have on this chart. But we have a significant amount of capital that we need to fund for electric. And that plan has been fairly recently developed. It was used in the fiscal model, and our general rates looking out continue to be at or under the rate of inflation. Part of that is the reduced debt service that we're seeing from the refunding that happened a few years ago. This year, there is no rate increase projected. However, we are increasing the customer fee. That flat fee that customers pay each month. And that will be a multi-year implementation to kind of phase that in. The fee has not been adjusted for nearly 10 years. So this one, the capital projects for electric are a little bit complicated this year. So you can see that the top section is all of the new capital funding. The bottom section is really looking at the older projects and saying, okay, these projects have some funding left. We maybe don't need them, or they'd be better used elsewhere. So we've reallocated about $750,000 to current priorities. And then, a lot of these are ongoing work. I did want to point out that there's a few future items that are being appropriated that are really, they're not to be spent in the near future. They're to be saved up and then spent later. That is diesel generation upgrades. That goes, I believe we have 1.5 million already set aside. And the Thimbleberry transmission line bypass, and then future hydropower generation. So we've got about $1.5 million that we're setting aside for those projects, so they don't have to be all set aside at once. We'll be saving up over a number of years. So are there any questions? And feel free, I'm kind of hitting the high level and the overall impact. If there are any questions about the budgets, just chime in as we go through.
So Melissa, these ones, you said the priority, so you put this together in conjunction with the electric department?
Yes.
And so they've had their hand in viewing things. that they
Very
feel
much. It's
appropriate.
very much led by the electric department, with me working with them to kind of go over what balances we have in the current projects. And because I don't know what they need, they're the ones who know that. And then together we went through and said, okay, well, we're done with the first phase of Green Lake. It makes sense to put that into the second phase. So we kind of went through that process with all of the projects on here.
Thank you.
I'd like to add to this as well that this is the first time in many, many years that we've actually had a detailed capital plan in the electric department. If you remember in the past, he usually just said T&D improvements, hydro improvements. Mike Schmetzer and his team did a whole lot of work this last year to line out a good capital plan, and it's going to improve. We're trying to bring that out to a 10-year forward look, but this helped us with the rate study immensely this year, having more detailed information.
Thank you. That's excellent.
Okay, any other questions on electric? Okay, we'll move on to water. So we expect for FY25 the debt service for the critical secondary water project to come online. That's a significant amount, so you definitely see debt service increasing. We had prepared for this. I believe it was in 2021 that we had a much more substantial rate increase, knowing that this was coming. So the kind of painful increase related to that has already come. So the rate increase for water for fiscal 25 is 4%. I did just want to note that in the long-term outlook, there are some capital projects that are, highly recommended, that at this point we do have the placeholder is for those to be covered with grants. So if at some point we decide to move forward with those and are unable to get grants, kind of the projected rate increases that we're looking at in the fiscal model would have to change. And then just another thing to note is that we have, we generally rely quite heavily on the low interest DEC loans for both water and wastewater. For both water and wastewater, the past 2 years, we have appropriated more working capital for projects than we have in prior years. So it's just something to keep an eye on. And I think you see that change in the levels of working capital. The other thing to note on working capital is the working capital is all of our working capital. It does include unspent appropriations for capital projects. So for water fund, you can see we have 1.3 million for our capital appropriation. A considerable chunk of that is added funding for the Lake Street and Hearst utility street improvements. That project is well underway in terms of design. The costs have, as we've gotten further into design, have proven to be much higher than expected. So you're seeing additional appropriations in general fund water and wastewater. These projects deal with the paving, so that's general fund paving and storm drains, and then the water lines and sewer lines are covered largely by DEC loans, but the difference that's needed for this year, we have covered with working capital. And then these are just other projects that are in the plan and being appropriated to start working on. So I think that's all on this one. Are there any questions on the water fund?
How many tanks do we have in Sika? I can count 3. It says tank cleaning and tank repairs. Is that all of them or particular ones or?
I do not know.
I don't know either. And Ron's out for some travel at the moment, so I apologize.
They are big tanks, though. Okay, for wastewater fund, we are seeing some of the bigger loans that we had for the wastewater treatment plant are going in, have gone into repayment already. We are also seeing the impact of the effluent disinfection, which is the secondary disinfection that we are being required to do. The rate increase is 8.25%. And again, we are expending more working capital to fund our capital appropriations this year than we have in the past. Our working capital it's been a little bit higher, partially because of capital appropriations that we've set aside, but it is projected to be quite a bit lower looking forward. So it's something that we'll definitely have to keep an eye on. And again, we have the Lake Hearst Utility Improvement Project getting more funding put in. The way these projects are split is based on, we work with the engineers on the project and they determine kind of the overall cost, but then we break it down by fund so that there's a justifiable split. DEC requires that, as do our accounting requirements. So you can see we have a few other smaller projects, with the bigger one being funding for the Lake and Lincoln Lift Street Rehabilitation Project. And then a longer one looking out is the sewer force main replacement. This one is proposed to be funded with DEC loans. So along with this budget, we will be requesting approval to take on debt is required to be done by ordinance. And since the rates and the budgets are very closely intertwined, we do that all at once. So with this budget, you'll be approving the appropriations, the rates, and then any debt. So in this case, for the wastewater fund, it will be this $6 million DEC loan. Any questions on wastewater? Okay, for solid waste, their working capital has been a challenge for years. The overall working capital at the end of FY23 was positive. That was largely because we had a big capital appropriation and it was unspent. So the actual available working capital for operations was still negative in FY '23, and it's projected to be at the end of FY '24. Getting better in FY '25, but if we were to spend down all of the capital appropriation, it would still be negative, but we're definitely on a positive trajectory. We are still refining the operation of the compactor, but they're definitely getting that dialed in. The primary savings from that comes from achieving higher weight per container. There's a minimum amount for each container. So if we fall under that minimum weight, we're paying more per ton. So they're doing a really great job getting those containers to be as heavy as possible. And
We're actually getting them so heavy now that we're being asked to scale back because they might not be safe on the roads where we ship them to. So we're doing a great job with it in our minimum weights now.
Is it noticeable on the amount that we're paying to ship then?
Yes, we were seldom ever hitting our 29-ton minimum now, and I think we're getting around 32 was the number that we're getting in those containers now.
And our cost per container has gone down as well because we are using smaller containers. So we're using a 40-foot container instead of a 48-foot. But you know, as we get closer to the end of the year, and really, you know, there's so many fluctuations throughout the year. I haven't done a full analysis, but as we get closer to the end of the year, we'll be looking closely and be able to better explain the savings. The other thing I wanted to note for Solid Waste Fund is we have in the budget restructured how we're tracking some of the different operating accounts. So you'll notice that in some areas, the prior years will have all zeros because we really want to be able to better analyze and track how what areas are costing us, you know, what they're costing us. So really breaking down by what the collection piece is, what the off-island shipping is, and breaking that down so we can say, because right now, you know, we just have one contract for everything we ship off island. We really want to know how much of that waste going off island is attributable to people doing refuse drops, how much is attributable to collections. It's going to help us refine the rate structure and make sure that that's being applied fairly. So you'll notice the budget looks a little odd. The overall numbers are the same. We're just going to be tracking a bit differently for next year. So any questions on solid waste? So again, this is just our snapshot of the impact of the increases. I know electric is not a true 0%, but just the formulas in here, the way that works, what we see is a monthly increase of 75 cents for that customer fee increase. And then we have our 4% for water, which is $2.41 a month, 8.25% for wastewater, which is our biggest increase, and the cost is $6.64 a month. And then solid waste, we have an increase of $3.13. So the annual cost of all of these changes, in this example, would be $155.94. So moving on to Harbor Fund, you know, we've been doing a lot of work on getting condition assessments, and then we've really been looking at what we can do to extend the life of key assets. That it has definitely helped. You know, last year we had an 8.3% increase, partially due to inflation. But this year we were able to recommend a 4% increase. And then we're still seeking grants where we can to try to offset some of those. And then I just wanted to note, it looks like there's a great deal of working capital in this fund. However, nearly 10 million of that working capital was appropriated for capital projects. So just a few capital projects for the Harbor Fund next year. So we've got fixing up the Sealing Cove Fish Cleaning Station, some anode replacements, which that one we're still looking into to see what the timing is on replacing the seawall by the Marine Service Center. If we can avoid doing this one, we will. But if we need to get them on there to keep it alive until we are able to get that project done, then we'll need to spend this. And then just some security camera replacements. The other thing I just wanted to note is that the Elias and Electrical project, for which we have over 5 million appropriated, we are really looking at reducing the cost of that project and really matching the repairs with the expected life of Elias and Harbor. So that should hopefully allow us to kind of move some of that funding that's got a placeholder for that project back into the parent fund. So any questions on harbors? Okay, so for the airport fund, I will be very honest and say that the expense budget was a guess this year. Joseph B. and I kind of worked through and did our best, but there's a lot of unknowns there. So we'll be watching this one closely throughout the year, make sure that we have appropriations needed to manage that terminal. It's also a big challenge because this is going to be a construction year. So we don't know what expenses we'll run into. And the only capital project that we had in here, you'll see in the detail sheet, we've continued to refine the amount of grant funding for the project. So we've just slightly increased the amount of contingent grant funding. And just to note that this, the working capital includes the funding that we have appropriated for the terminal project, the match portion. So there's really very little free and clear working capital in the fund. Marine Service Center is always one of our healthiest funds and one of our most simple funds. So it has a steady revenue stream and pretty steady operating expenses, largely related to maintenance of the facility. We do have a few capital projects. We have a lighting replacement project and then replacing the remaining overhead doors. And then it's possible there could be more work. We have some funding appropriated for shutdown work, but if something significant is found, there would be a supplemental appropriation that would come forward.
This may be a silly question, but how are you going to shut it down without all the stuff going bad?
That is actually built into the lease that we have, and all of the tenants know that that's there. It's important to them that the facility is maintained, so it will not unexpectedly shut down. So there is a plan in place. I don't have the details on that.
Okay.
And then finally, we have the PIP Fund, which, as it has for in recent years, we have our operating expenses outpacing our revenue. I just want to note that we do not have haul out operations or revenue built in. It's very likely that we will need to come back at some point, but we wouldn't do that until we have a better idea of what is needed. I believe the plan right now is for the haul out to be operational toward the end of next fiscal year. So we've still got some time there. And then again, the working capital is primarily all of the funds that we have appropriated for that capital project. And then we move on to our internal service funds. These funds are really structured to break even. And in some years, we'll have, be slightly up for some reason. Maybe our expenses were less than anticipated. So then the next year you might see a deficit budget. So for the IT fund, you can see that IT did have a bit of a surplus at the end of fiscal 23. So the budget for fiscal 25 or fiscal 24 kind of eliminated that. And that was related to some grant funds that came in for a IT system. And so then the next year, we kind of reduced the allocation. So less revenue came in, and then we're pretty flat for FY25. We do have, just to note, the fiber project is being transferred out of the IT fund into the capital project fund. And then the other funds are kind of pitching in to pay that. To the IT fund, because that is something that is shared by the whole organization. So central garage, we still have inflation impacting the vehicle replacements, but it has definitely gotten better. The wait times for equipment and vehicles is much less, and the availability is better. We also had I think there was about 2 years there where we really couldn't get vehicles through the state contracts, which are much easier to use and also have very good pricing. So those do seem to be coming back. And you can see that the green line was the fleet age last year. The orange line is the current fleet. So that is improving. We have fewer vehicles that are 15 years or older right now than we did last year. And that's really important because the central garage is really set up to be a preventative maintenance shop. So when we start having the really old labor-intensive vehicles or equipment, it makes it really hard for them to keep up. And the working capital, you can see working capital is growing for central garage, and that really has to do with the sinking fund and the fact that we've seen the cost of vehicles rise so much. And while they're not rising as quickly, they're also not going backwards. So we've been having to really kind of make up, we had set aside funds for sinking funds at a projected future rate that was too low. And so we've been having to make that up over the past couple of years. And then building maintenance, this one always, it looks a little backwards. So if we actually were to implement the FY24 budget as budgeted, we would eat up pretty much all of the funds working capital. We know we're not going to be able to do that, but at the same time, there's a lot of work that they want to get done. So we've been budgeting to do that work. If somehow they were able to accomplish it all, we would do kind of make up for it in the subsequent year. I'm talking too much. You guys aren't asking enough questions. Okay, so now we'll go on to all of our other governmental funds, which we have a lot of different little funds. So we should be able to go through these pretty quickly. I'll go quickly, but please stop me if you have any questions. We have two agency funds, the cemetery agency and the Row Trust Fund. And it just has to do, the type of fund they are has to do with how they're set up. But this one, it was originally $100,000 investment. And the interest from that is transferred annually to the Sitka Cemetery Association. The fund balance at the end of FY '23 was 98,000. The revenue we expect for FY '25 is 2,500, so there'd be a $2,500 appropriation. And then Row Trust Fund, which this is to be used it's really for the library, for the purchase of children's book and computer equipment to facilitate children's enjoyment of reading. The fund balance at the end of FY '23 was 220,000. Expected revenue for FY '23 was 3,000 and the appropriation 3,000. The permanent fund, again, the purpose of the permanent fund,
On those funds, I'm just curious, where do we have those invested?
they're part of the operating fund.
Okay.
So they're with the rest of the central treasury.
Okay.
So the purpose of the permanent fund is to grow in perpetuity and to reduce the tax burden on the citizens of Sitka. So every year by charter, 6% is of the average of the prior 3 years at 12/31 is transferred to the general fund. We have been, over the past number of years, working to inflation proof that. In FY '25, we are finally at the goal of making it a net 4% transfer. At one point, we did actually transfer in and then transfer out. Right now, we just do a net transfer out. It saves a lot of time. So there will be a net 4% going from the permanent fund into the general fund. And, there's generally quite a bit more revenue, but we don't budget for the gains or losses or sale of investment. So we just have 450,000 expected revenue. The fund balance was 24.4 million. And then when I originally published the draft budget, I had all of the proceeds from the new seasonal sales tax going into the public infrastructure sinking fund. So this was a correction that I made. I realized that there's probably restrictions on the public infrastructure sinking fund that wouldn't make sense to have that funding go in. I'm always very hesitant to add new funds. It just increases the complexity of everything. But I did create a new fund to track the school building infrastructure funds that are generated from the 1% seasonal sales tax. So. And I'm pretty sure I copied and pasted this from somewhere else because there is definitely a $0 fund balance at the end of FY '23, but the expected revenue, I believe, is about 2.5 million for FY '25, and the current appropriation we have is a transfer out from the school building infrastructure fund of 400,000 into the general fund, and that is to help fund a portion of the building maintenance that we're taking on. The public infrastructure sinking fund, This is so the reason the fund balance at the end of FY '23 is so high is because we did an appropriation effective 6/30 that put the amount that we have available for use this year. It also had the amount that we appropriated last year. And last year, the appropriation was 5 million. So that leaves about 4.5 million in the Public Infrastructure Sinking Fund. And we do generate interest on that. So right now, the projected revenue is 75,000, and the appropriation going into the general fund to offset the available capital and maintenance projects is close to 4 million. And again, we transfer funds in there. We analyze the surplus at the end of the fiscal year, and then John makes a recommendation to the Assembly for an amount to transfer in. And so that comes forward as a supplemental appropriation. We have our school bond debt service fund. So this one has been to track the debt service on our school bonds and also track the previous transfers in from the seasonal sales tax that we collected on this until it sunset, when we determined we had enough to cover the rest of the school bonds. One thing to note is we will likely end up having extra in this fund at the end, because one of the challenges that we've seen is we can't rely on the state to make the payment, their portion of the payments. So if they continue to meet their obligation, there will be extra in here. And it's probably by next year, we'll have a better idea. These bonds are due to be paid off in FY '31.
So we'll have extra money in here
Yes.
next year or the year after, all the way
We'll
through?
have a
Okay.
better idea, if the
Mhm.
state goes for 2 years and meets their obligation, we'll have an idea of funding that could be available.
Okay. That'd be nice.
Then we have the pet adoption fund. So this is for donations that people make to help support pet adoption. The fund balance at the end of FY '23 was for 46.7 thousand. And we get a small amount of donations each year. Some years there'll be an event, it'll bounce up. We have been appropriating more than we've been bringing in because there's been a significant need in recent years. And then we have the asset forfeiture fund. And this is really this tracks funds generated when police department seizes assets. And so we really hold them until they have to be distributed.
Don't those have to be used by the police department?
Well, I think sometimes they're actually just held until a case is resolved.
Okay.
So I think that is generally more what we're looking at.
I just was under the impression that if they seized an asset because it's been used for drugs by law, it had to be used for the actual police department.
I'm not sure. We haven't actually used anything since I've been in this seat, so.
With the pet adoption, if we're spending more than we're kind of making, is that, it doesn't come to the Assembly, who gets to decide those pieces?
Well, so right here, this would essentially be a deficit budget. If the appropriation goes over 15,000 and there's more of a need, then we would definitely have to come to the Assembly, so. And these smaller funds can be pretty tricky. So you'll see in some cases, there's some funds where the revenue, it might be interest generated, but by code or policy, we have to transfer that over. So in some cases, my revenue projection or my appropriation is higher than my revenue projection, because I don't want to have to make Sarah go through all the work of putting supplemental appropriations forward for some of these little things. But, if something goes over, we have to bring them forward. So for the library building fund, we have a fund balance of $18,000. Expect $300 in revenue and have a $5,000 appropriation. The Southeast Economic Development Fund, the fund balance is 3.4 million, but as of the end of FY23, there was only 285,000 available. The bulk of that has been loaned to solid waste for the compactor. So we're expecting revenue of 2,600 and appropriation, any proceeds, interest proceeds from this fund go to building maintenance. So we have 3,000 there. And then we have our GPIP Contingency Fund. And that fund balance at the end of FY23 was 339,000. Again, the revenue on this is just interest, so we have 4,500 and an FY25 appropriation of 4,000. The Sitka Community Hospital Fund, we are slowly seeing that fund balance come up. So we're at a negative 389,000. That may well by the end of FY24 be positive. And the expected revenue is 1.7 million. And then the appropriation is 1.7 million. That's largely the PERS liability, ongoing PERS liability for the hospital that we're paying off. And then we do have a placeholder of about 250,000 for the remaining Stark liability. I'm working on right now, trying to see where we are on that. If we can, there's an appropriation in FY24. If we're able to resolve it this year, we certainly wouldn't use that appropriation in FY25. So we have our Student Activities Fund, which now, in addition to the little bits of funding that come in for licenses and permits, tracks the now 8% marijuana tax that goes to the schools. So the fund balance at the end of FY23 was 142,000. So the marijuana tax started in January of calendar year 23. So we actually used part of that in this fiscal year to fund the 300,000 to the schools. So projected revenue for FY25, we have 313,000. Our FY25 appropriation to the schools is 300,000, and then we have a small 5,000, which is really the license portion that the assembly could use for an appropriate purpose. Next, we have the Fisheries Enhancement Fund. So this is the fish box tax. 30% of the fish box tax goes into this fund for the grant program. So the fund balance at the end of FY23 was 3,300. We have a projected revenue of 45,000. Just in case it comes in higher, I have the appropriation set at 50,000, but it will be, we will only use whatever comes in from the fish box tax.
So I have a question for you. If we can go back over the one above it,
So the 142,000, that's with the city at the moment?
Well, no, a lot of that has been paid out because the appropriation for fiscal '24, what started in July of '23, that the revenue for that was a guess. And it's come in under, so we have used a portion of that.
So it's not with the district? Like that 140?
Some of it is. I don't know exactly where we are in our FY '20 or FY '24 proceeds. But I know that it was down from the original projections of 300,000. So that meant that we kind of used some of that initial balance.
Initial balance to do,
So the 142 came in at the beginning of or the second half of fiscal '23. So that tax went through in October, and then we had to make a projection for fiscal '24, really based on very little data. So we did end up projecting a little high, which means that we've had to use some of that. Because not all of the proceeds that have come in '24, it hasn't been enough to cover the appropriation. So we've had to use some of that fund balance.
and
And I don't have a number for you exactly what it is.
and the difference between the revenue and the appropriation is just a guess? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
And it does include the licenses as well and interest.
But the district can expect to see all of it except for license.
Right now, we have an appropriation of 300 for the district.
And if there's
So-
a difference from that, then
We can come back with a supplemental, or we can adjust it for the next year. It's definitely been some guesswork in this kind of beginning phase. I'm also, we're not sure kind of what the proceeds are gonna look like with the 8%, so. Unfortunately, budgeting is more guesswork than I'd like. We have the utility subsidization fund. So for this one, again, we try to make sure there's enough in there so that we can fully fund the program, which opens in August, and all of the applications are received by the end of October. So this year, we have about 195 people on it. And so the revenue coming in is a transfer from the general fund. That should give us enough to fully fund the program for fiscal '25. And should it not be enough, we would come forward and have that as an assembly discussion item. The commercial vessel tax fund is, we have the fund balance at the end of FY '23 at 2 million. Expected revenue for '25 is 2.5 million. The current appropriation is about 1.6 million, and that's really the reimbursement of directly incurred costs and the allocation model, so just covering the costs to the city. That's going primarily into the general fund, some's going into the harbor fund, and then some into building maintenance.
So I know on each of those funds, the allocation model is going to put a lot of money in them. But have we budgeted for those in each of those funds as well? And are we at risk of not doing this allocation model and then having to go back and change revenues in some of those other funds?
We could. The funds that it's hitting again are the allocation is only hitting the general fund. All of the other funds are based on directly incurred costs. So, if we have staff out there doing the street closure on big ship days, those costs we're tracking, staff time and
And we're
vehicle
solid
use.
that transfer will happen to the general fund at this point?
At this point, yes.
And is it budgeted as revenue in the general fund as
Yes.
well? Okay, thank you.
And then the Visitor Enhancement Fund, which I know we may discuss further later. So this one right now, I just wanted to go over what is there. The fund balance at the end of FY '23 is 429,000. The revenue, which it comes from bed tax, projected for FY '25 is 716. We are seeing a pretty significant contraction in revenue on bed tax. I don't know the reasons for that. I don't know if it's compliance. I don't know if it's just general use. But the FY '23 revenue was 492. And my projections, have us at 712 for FY '25. We will not meet, we had projected an increase for FY '24, and we're not going to meet the amount that we got in FY '23. It's definitely falling. So it's something to keep an eye on. And right now, the only thing I have in there, because I know the assembly needs to have more discussion on the visitor services contract. So the only thing we have in there is audit fees and some travel.
Sorry, so on the contraction, because we're having like the same amount of tourism the past and increased, or the same amount this year pretty much, but increased last year. So it's interesting that more people, but less revenue. Do you think that's because the VRBOs, those people have to pay bed tax, correct? Or is they get out of that?
It's very hard to know. There are certainly some do, but the ones we don't know about, we don't know about.
Because it seems like that should be something that should be looked into, because it could get out of control.
Yeah.
Well, we had a major hotel switch.
Which one?
The Old West, the old Sheffield. Search
that's
bought it and they're putting their construction crews
That's
there.
right. Okay.
So that
Yeah.
that was a good sized hotel that is no longer
Yeah.
producing any revenue for that.
It's true.
Yep, that very likely is playing into it, so. So anyway, just, we'll talk about this more. We can certainly pass a budget as it is and make a supplemental appropriation. We can do that at any time, for FY '25. But right now, this is what is in there. I didn't feel comfortable putting any guesses in, so we just stuck to the expenses that I know are likely to be coming out of the fund.
So you're saying 24 is not gonna meet? I guess, how much did we get?
We had 839, I believe, projected for FY '24, and we received 792 in '23, and
792 is what we received in 23.
yeah,
And so you're saying we're not gonna meet that 792?
no. We're not. The fund's still whole. We're still covering the fund's expenses right now, so we're not going into a deficit situation, but definitely generating less revenue. Next, we have the revolving fund and the guarantee fund. These are both related to LIDs. One is working capital that can be used to finance the cost of LIDs. And then we have the guarantee fund, which can guarantee debt service for bond issuance for LIDs. So we had 1.1 million in the revolving fund. We expect revenue to be 22,000. Again, that is interest revenue and, a bit of payments coming in. The interest on this one's really structured to not grow. The interest goes into the general fund. And the same with the guarantee fund. We have the library donation fund. So this tracks donations that are made to the public library. So the fund balance at the end of FY '23 was 256,000. We have a projected revenue of 5,500 and appropriation of 5,500. And then we have the bulk water fund, which we had $800,000 at the end of FY '23. We used a great deal of this to purchase the building at the haul out site. So the revenue and appropriation revenue is just interest. And the bulk water fund goes out to GPIP, but that amount is much less this year because the current fund balance is much less than the 800,000. All right, are there any questions on those many, many slides we just went through?
Yeah, I have several actually. Can I jump ahead of you? So I guess my first question, can we go back to the slide about building maintenance?
Wow, it's much slower than my computer here.
So look, as I understand it, when maintenance is done for a department, they pay into this fund. Is that correct?
We do, so what we've done, previously, we used to code everything, every time, every piece of equipment. It was very time intensive and we couldn't capture everything. So what we do now is an allocation model, kind of based on a number of criteria. And then we'll be, as our asset management system gets kicked off, we'll be building that in more.
So is the plan to charge the district when we do their maintenance on the buildings for them?
Right now, how we have the district budgeted, no, we won't be charging it. The general fund pays. So that's coming as an interdepartmental expense under schools into there. Right now, we have, and I'm trying to remember, I didn't 100% allocate the total staff time because we assume that, you know, there might be times where some of those staff that we would be absorbing might be doing things for city as well, but definitely primarily focused on the school district. And then we have kind of extra supplies and tools and materials that total 640.
I guess mine's a more global question on this one because right now, the structure that we have is that departments will pay for the maintenance. They kind of contribute to the fund. And right now, all of us sitting in the room understand the school district's not part of that. But down the road, the school district will just become another the buildings will become another set of buildings for the city. So what is the structure of the agreement that's being put in place for taking over maintenance? And will it indicate that ongoingly the district's not going to be just another contributor to the building fund, but is separate from the ones that we're doing now? Because I think that's the understanding that the school district's going to walk away with. And I think long-term, I don't foresee, the benefit to the school district in handing it over is to lose that cost. And if down the road it becomes a cost, then the benefit is no longer, and I know are not all looking at it that way right now, but what are we putting in place to make sure that it doesn't change down the road, I guess is what I'm asking. That's my first question.
And I would say on that one that it's very much as we have a better idea of the understanding of what it's going to cost. It's going to be part of our allocation model, but it's going to hit the general fund.
And it's not going to be considered part of the city's contribution to the school district in terms of like part of the cap or whatever.
No, I don't think it could be.
Yeah, we're keeping it outside the cap.
I just want to be clear on that. I'm going to ask later to see what the agreement is to see that we're making sure that we're doing that, that brings me to my second question, which is what is the mechanism for spending the 1%? Because as the buildings come under the city's responsibility, that 1% could assume that 1% summer sales tax could be is for building maintenance for the school district. Is that considered just to be the city's responsibility? What, are the cities going to take that money in and then just use it for that? And what's the mechanism for the school district to come forward and look to build, to do other projects? As I recall, you can borrow against that total, right? You can bond with that money. So
Yeah.
if the school district comes up with a bond package or an idea of, say, $4 million bonding to fix the playgrounds or whatever, what is the mechanism that we see for that going forward? It's not just to become the sinking fund for maintenance on the school buildings. It's also to be used as the district sees fit to change direction of buildings or whatever. Is that still the understanding? And what is that mechanism going to look like? Because I haven't heard that yet.
We have the conceptual plan at the moment. I mean, I agree with you. That's that 1% seasonal is going to be dedicated for school maintenance. We've not really gotten into discussion against on bonding against that and if they want to do a larger project. The agreement still needs to come together. We still need to work on the MOU and Public Works has already started heading that direction. But the reason we've built the structure with the supervisor staying there with the school, that's the conduit from what the schools need. And then our staff is kind of the asset management function on it. What are the highest priorities? And essentially we build a capital plan prioritized exactly the same way we do for other city facilities, with the focus on using that seasonal sales tax to cover that expense.
So who's holding the money? In other words, who's making the decision on projects going forward? Would that be the assembly making that decision, or would it be the school board making that decision?
I think there's going to be school board input, and it would, just like we bring forward a capital plan, I think that's where it would fall on the assembly. Does this capital plan look appropriate? And when you have your annual work session with the school board, and deciding funding levels, that could be one of the opportunities to kind of confirm or support their capital needs.
So the answer is the city's still holding the money.
City does hold the money, correct?
I'll wait on my last question until we get done with this, where we're at on this one.
Well, we are about to, the next one is kind of revisiting general fund. So if we have any others on this, are there any other questions on our special funds or enterprise or internal service?
And if not, excuse me, since it is past the hour, we'll take a brief recess before we move into general fund stuff. Please be seated when you're ready to continue. All right, well, we are seated again. Guess we're changing over now to the general fund budget review, some of the changes that we've made and the deficit that we have to destroy tonight.
Okay, I just wanted to start going through, reviewing some of the changes because I didn't have all of the really detailed numbers for you at the table. So the net impact to the general fund from taking on the swimming pool operations is 125,212. So that's the net impact on the deficit. So that's a cost of 125,212. So we added total expense of 374,000. Taking on the pool, we eliminated the subsidy that we had budgeted going to the school district. And then we added revenue, which would be generated from the pool of 125,000. The expense is under the Parks and Rec program. So it doesn't show as, necessarily support to the school district, but the idea is that it should eliminate some of their expenses. And then we also added funding of 125,000 for the PAC.
So what you're saying on that is the goal for revenue for the pool is $125,000 a year.
No, that's not the goal. That is we're starting up this year and.
Well, I mean, you calculate, I mean, they will make some, but that's already calculated in, isn't it?
We hope it would eventually be more than 125. The 125 is a kind of, we're going to start here. But as they're able to get more programs up and running, the hope is it would be higher and eventually in further years out, the overall cost could be less.
And Craig Warren's water polo class that I think he's going to start up there is going to probably bring in a lot of crowd.
Polo, I thought it was aerobics.
Okay, so the other thing that we really want to get nailed down and be super clear on is the school funding that's in the current budget. So this is the table that we kind of put in the budget letter to the school district. So we have the local monthly support. So that is the support up to the cap of 7.7 million. We have an 134,600 coming from the general fund for student activities. And then in addition, 300,000 from the marijuana tax proceeds. For the Performing Arts Center, we'd be paying 66,000 of, same as we do now. The utility bill is in the school district's name. We pay up to 66,000. And then up to 125 for the RFP. The kind of other funding that we have, which isn't going to the schools, but offsetting is the school building maintenance. And then disbursement of secure rural schools funding. And we have it right now. I have 360 in there on the side, but it's actually up to 300,000. Which it has consistently been over 300,000, so.
I don't know if this is really the appropriate time to jump in, but in an effort to get rid of the deficit budget, I know, Mr. Pike, you had lots of questions about the maintenance program. If this is one we could say, if we did say no go on this one this year, your budget's balanced. We could go back to the typical $150,000 contribution for maintenance to the schools, eliminate this line and leave things status quo. The funding from that 1% sales tax or seasonal sales tax would still be in the city's account, but it would then be on the school to decide their major capital needs. What I would still hope out of that situation is that we still have that total asset visibility, meaning they roll into our asset management system and we can see maintenance needs anyway, so we can help or we can anticipate what's coming up and any funding needs they may have. But that's not, it's not going to upset too much if we just stay with the status quo there, and that can get rid of the
So
deficit.
you're suggesting that we, I know you're not suggesting, but you're saying that we could balance budget if we didn't do what we've offered, the 640,000. I don't know that that's tenable because we already, I mean, they built their budget around that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it would be fair because we've already basically told them we would, and they built their budget around that. I think that would be very hard.
Yeah, and I think that would be a bad idea because honestly, I think it would wind up costing the city a lot more money down the road because we would be having to replace stuff. I mean, they would be coming to us for things like heat pumps. And, you know, this isn't entirely an effort to try and help them with their budget. It does in the short term, but in the long term, it's to protect the city from having to step in and do things like that. I think it is, the stars have kind of aligned to where people are willing to do it this year. I don't think we can count on that, those stars staying in line. And at the end of the day, I think this is something that we want as a city, more as a city side, as least as much or more than the school district does, because it protects us. We would hopefully know, as John would say, know the alligators before, while they're still in the swamp. And so, you know, and, you know, we happen to have the administration that was in the place in the last year that was willing to talk about it. But if we can make this happen, I think it'll help us.
You're talking about keeping the 600.
Keeping it in this, you know, it's not in the city side
Yeah, but
yet.
we're
It's still
going
being,
to.
you know, negotiated, but I think it's only going to get harder to do that. And depending on everything from personalities to things in process and things like that, and I'm afraid that we would be probably not the same thing, but something like the heat pumps on a regular basis, because we don't know truly what the state of things is.
So I was just trying to, so you're saying, and by the way, to clarify, John, I did not mean to insinuate in any way, this is a small town, that you were saying we should do this. So you're trying to give us facts. So, and I understand that you're very apolitical on this. You're just giving us numbers. So Tor, because as far as, in my mind, if we offer to do this, we do it, we own it, you know, for perpetuity. Is that what you're saying too?
No, we own it, but I think it'll save us money in the long run.
Oh, okay, okay.
Because ultimately, we own all those buildings. The city owns the buildings, and we're responsible for them. And no assembly is going to let the school, if something catastrophic breaks or doesn't get the proper, I mean, at the very least, we will know because we're doing the needs assessment and we're getting in line. We know it. We're going to hopefully know a lot better for all the cities stuff. But then we would have real oversight with a wider pool of expertise to attack some of these things before and hopefully we would know before something catastrophic breaks more often. I mean, you can't know 100%. We wouldn't get blindsided. And when we get blindsided, we pay more. You know, it's not a case of where we can plan for it and save up money, you know, like we do with a lot of our other projects where we put in a little bit of money over years to, you know, like on some of those other projects, we're saying, well, on the electrical department, we put in 500 grand for this, even though we know we're not going to do it this year. We're building up for that project.
I see what you mean.
And if we get blindsided by something, because, and then I think in the long term, you know, the guys at the schools now have to be jack of all trades, experts of none. And The city's a big enough entity where we've actually got experts or access to them. And so we can attack some of these things. And I think that the service will be better. I mean, I think we'll do a better job just because we're a bigger entity. And at the end of the day, if we don't, I don't think, like I say, I don't think the stars are going to align again for us to where the school district is interested in this and we're interested in it. And I think at the end of the day, all it takes is one or two big surprises and it would dwarf that 640.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, that makes sense.
And if we use 400,000 from the new tax, that it's offset to that.
Yep.
But, you know, it could easily cost us a lot more than that if we don't do it, is what I'm saying. And then, you know, looking 20 years, you know, hopefully when none of us are on the assembly. you know,
Yes.
so.
Okay, I get it. And to round out, Tim, what you were saying before, yeah, about the extra 1% in the summer. I like this because we're basically taking back or over ownership of the school buildings, facilities. So this way we incorporate the buildings and the facilities into the asset matrix. The city's doing, reviews of the needs of the school buildings. So then it's a comprehensive plan owned by the city that we know and we can plan for, and we can use some of that 1% for maintenance, and we can use some of it for building repairs and replacement in that itself, if we needed to take bonds out for that. And of course, if we ever needed to do that, we would obviously, work in conjunction with the school district closely.
There's one other aspect of it that if the state wants to get really nasty about the cap, they could look at that and say, no, that's in the cap, that should be in the cap. But if we are doing, if it's a city project, city workers, that likelihood is much less.
I agree.
So I think, I usually try to use choose my words wisely. I asked the mechanism for the 1%. I wasn't indicating that I thought it should belong to one group or the other. I think clarity is super important when you're talking about money of this caliber, and you have people who feel that they're invested in things, which the school district feels it is about its buildings. So then clarity as to who's responsible for deciding how to spend it, that's really an important piece of this. When it was the school's maintenance, I think the expectation was the school district would be in control at least of determining what was taking place. If that's not the case, that needs to be real clear so everybody understands how this is taking place. I wasn't indicating that I thought we should give the maintenance back to them. I think I agree with everything that Tor has said about, and Kevin have said about what the benefits of keeping the maintenance under the city. I think the city has a lot more invested in this than the school district, and I think this is a good move. But I do think clarity in terms of the mechanism for how the 1% gets spent is really, really important. And how much stake does each school have in it? How much stake does the school board have in it? Who gets to determine this? And I think the last thing the assembly wants going forward is a constant drip of we're doing this project and this project and this project and this project. I mean, if we have a monthly school district maintenance project line item on our agenda, I'm not sure that's going to go over super well. So I just want to understand how it works. I just want to be sure that it's clear. I just want to make sure everybody knows so that we don't have a disagreement down the road or some conversation about who's responsible for what and why they don't have it. So.
Yeah, Trey, I have to agree 100%. You're right. That's a very good point, and I'm glad you brought it up. Because we're all, most of us, I mean, I believe majority of the assembly is in support now, but clarity is very, very important to set that right now.
Okay, so I'm hearing that at this point, we don't have any changes to school funding. Because I know that it is really important for the district to have a good idea, so we're all on the same page early so they can draft their budget and then we don't have any surprises and have to have quick revisions and that kind of thing. So I just wanted to go through all of the changes that have been made since that original draft was published. There were a couple corrections. So I realized that I had not moved out. We had something that's really more appropriate to be a capital project than operating. It's a net zero change, or it's actually a fixed asset. No, it's capital, sorry, but it goes. It's hard. You have to understand the nuances, and that's a huge challenge of the way our charter is written. Because if I get, something, if it has to be recorded as capital or fixed, or I have to come back to the assembly, even if the amount is exactly the same, the project's the same. So I try really hard to get that. But so at least we caught this one before we have to go to a 2-reading supplemental appropriation. And so again, net zero. The transfer from the school building infrastructure fund, I originally had it with the public infrastructure sinking fund. So that just changed accounts within the general fund, still under transfers. But it just makes it more visible and more clear. Then the only other kind of outside change that we had was there's been some damage, and it came to Public Works' attention that we really need to do a pretty substantial repair to the deck at the Tom Young cabin. So putting that in the FY25 budget should let us get that done. So that, again, it's a net zero. That's going to be funded with the Public Infrastructure Sinking Fund. So we have a transfer in, and then increased appropriation out. So then we have the funding for the PAC, which we talked about, 125,000. The pool operations, so we increased revenue 125,000 with that, and then the net increase to expense was 250,000. The next one was reducing the resource proposal for 4 fire engineers by 1. That saved the general fund about 108,000. The removal of the circulation services librarian, that because there was temp labor that had to be reinstated there. So the net change there was about 75,000. And then we removed the purchase of the 5-yard dump truck. And so that saved the general fund about 77,000. So that brought us from a deficit of 250,000 to a deficit of 240,000. So a lot of work for 10,000, but. And so just to kind of keep perspective, so right now our deficit is 240,000. Just kind of reminding you, if we have a deficit, we go into reserves. So kind of our reserves are what you'd consider that green, but particularly that yellow. So if we did pass this budget and executed it exactly as projected, we would be dipping into that. Our undesignated or unassigned fund balance would reduce by about $250,000. So this is kind of, if there's any other changes, this would be a great time to have that discussion and let us know what those are.
You don't want it 4 meetings down the road from now? Okay.
Yeah. So honestly, in a budget this size, 240,000 is balanced. I mean, it's everything is a very educated estimate. And we make a lot of estimates throughout this. Almost everything with some exceptions, but almost everything is an estimate. And the only thing I can tell you for sure is it's going to change. We will have to make adjustments throughout the year. It happens, and there'd be no way not to. I am comfortable taking from reserves comfortably to do that, and in my mind it's theoretical, because yes, we say, okay, if we need to, but it's all a floating, moving target all year long. And I just, if we had if we were 240 over, it would be just as much of an estimate. And it would still be just as much of it could go south, it could go north. For this size of a budget, that is, balanced, because like I say, when you're getting that level of literally fractions of a percent, and it's like significant numbers in math. I mean, we're trying to get things down to a point where it doesn't make sense in the real world. And yeah, it's awful nice to say we didn't have to dip into reserves, but like I said, if we were 240, I think the risk would be pretty much the same, that we might have to dip into reserves, because it's everything. And it's, our staff does a really good job with the estimates, but when they get to be this large, there can't help be some variability. So, I mean, we could probably spend a few hours and find it. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be the same risk.
Like, so Tor, I agree with you. I think in around this range, actually, 250 grand with a budget this size, it's relatively small in the big picture. And there's a couple other factors that this is assuming full staffing, correct? Okay.
97%.
Okay, 90%, 7%. I know that if you took that logic all the way, you'd say, well, you're passing budget, that if everybody was hired, then we would be in that deficit. But that's if you think about it, we're not at full staffing, and our goal is to increase it. But I don't see in the trends that we're seeing now, we're seeing better recruitment recently, but I don't see it going to 97%. So there's that, which would create some more money. And then the other part is when government spending is not the same as a household spending as your checkbook. It's a lot more complicated, and one of the biggest thing is people expect services. They expect funds to be, spent for community services. So our job is to balance the savings and the investment in our infrastructure and our essential services versus the services that people want for things like Parks and Rec and investment in the schools. Well, schools is one of the essential services as far as I'm concerned. But it's a matter of finding that balance, because someone who's paying taxes here now sometimes is not gonna, they want to see something. And I'm not saying some other people, myself too. I as much as I'd like to save for 30 years from now, I'd like to see some benefit from that right now, right today. So I think that, say, taking on the maintenance of the school district or the buildings, increasing by taking the pools, which is eventually will probably be about a net zero eventually. These are really important things for our community. And if we can, I'm always of the mind, if we can afford to do it for the schools, we should try to do it. Fortunately, we can do that right now. And the school district is in a really bad place right now. And that's from outside factors beyond our control. So I believe we should invest in these things. And so that, I can't believe I'm saying it actually. A couple of years ago, I would have never said that, but I believe that we can comfortably pass a negative 240 budget. That's my opinion.
Then I'm going to come out of left field and say that there's absolutely no way I'll vote for a deficit budget. So the exact polar opposites there. I hoped there would be a better transition, but no one was jumping up right away. I can't do it. I can't vote for a deficit budget on our largest revenue that we've ever had as a municipality. It feels completely wrong to me. The amount of time that I've sat here trying to get our budget ratcheted down by 240,000 because we were unwilling to dip into our reserves, which to me is future money when things really go wrong. the amount of time we spent trying to ratchet down $240,000 was incredible. Some of the cost saving measures were, not putting sand on the roads or not snow plowing. We're going to do that anyway. So it really wasn't a cost saving measure. But the other thing that scares me about this budget and starting it out with a deficit, John, in any of this budget, is any potential wage increases from a comp study accounted for?
It is not accounted for, and I think timing for that wage increase, if it were to come out in that manner, probably won't happen until the next fiscal year budget. But that doesn't necessarily mean we couldn't come forward in February, March of next year for a supplemental appropriation. It is a possibility, but that's not factored into to these calculations.
Okay, so I didn't see it factored in anywhere, which leads me down. The comp study was something that the assembly approved because we wanted to get a fair rate of pay for our employees right now. Pushing it off till next year's budget, if we have that information sooner, seems excessive. The municipality, we're not bleeding positions, but we're not fully staffed. And there's work that needs to be done to get there. So I think that is another one of my concerns is I'm assuming $1 million plus on getting everybody elevated to an inflation adjusted amount. And that might be low, that might be high. I don't know. But if that comes out of this year's budget, then we're dipping again. Revenue estimates are conservative. I appreciate that. I'm a little fearful about revenue this year. I don't know how the season's going to go. I don't know how independent travelers are going to show up. I don't know how much money America has in their pocketbooks right now. I don't think the amount of money in our pocketbooks reflects the stock market right now. I think those are very drastically different. So I would like to continue down the road of looking at things to cut or push back next year. I think there's several vehicles where their sinking fund is not complete that could be pushed back a year. I think there's some talk about some positions. Nobody wants to talk about gates and body cams again, but I have those wrote down. So I think there's ways, but I don't see a lot of support necessarily for going down those. So if anybody else wants to talk about those with me, happy to do that as the night goes on.
Steve, sorry, if I could just say, Stephen, if you want to talk about it to get you to a yes, then let's spend the time.
I have need to talk about those things. There's few things that the citizens of Zika ask, and having been recently elected, I think that I'm more aware of that perhaps than some of the rest of us. And we're a small town out here kind of on our own, and to not pass a budget when our primary responsibilities are streets and schools and electricity this town doesn't ask a whole lot out of this body, but when we make a good chunk of money to not spend it wisely, I think is in our purview. And $200,000, sure, but on what side of the line is it $200,000? And I want to be on the positive side of that line. And if we can jump into the what are we looking at tonight conversation, I'd be happy to start that. And the first two resource proposals, the packet, both of them had in that kind of item 8. So this is the fixed asset for the patient loader, and the next one being personnel tourism manager. They both talked about the potential for CPP funds. So if that's a question for Melissa, is that cued into this or?
Yeah, so the 32,000 is offset by 32,000 coming in. And then I believe I have 50,000 coming in for the tourism manager. I didn't feel we could justify the full cost. So.
Okay, because the mention on the tourism manager was potentially general fund, potentially CPV, potentially visitor enhancement. So what are we looking for tonight from us on that?
We could definitely, visitor enhancement is a very open funding source. The assembly can use it for what they want. So that is definitely something that the assembly could direct.
And to streamline my sourcing through all of these research proposals, what else has kind of been noted as potentially visitor enhancement or potentially CPV?
Nothing for visitor enhancement coming into the general fund. CPV, let me pull that up. It's not in my head.
While you're looking it up, if we went with the contractual amount for the visit Sitka, the 300 and some odd thousand, that fixes this, correct? I mean, I know we're asking you ballpark numbers, but.
That doesn't impact the general
It
fund
comes from Visitor
whatsoever.
Enhancement
Yeah.
Fund. It wouldn't impact
can't,
general fund.
But you were saying we couldn't pull that back into the general fund?
You
I
could
think we
definitely
can
pull
through
that into
assembly
the
action.
general fund.
The tour, if we were to try to, sorry, I'm,
I mean, I was following up.
oh, I was saying if we pull, I do agree there's talk to be had about how much we send to visit Sitka, but, you know, investing in getting people here on a consistent basis, not overwhelming, but a consistent basis is also important to keep this revenue stream strong. Sorry, JJ, I apologize.
No, we're good. It's that kind of overall conversation on how do these pieces fit together, and it is a full body conversation here too. So that visitor enhancement fund, we've seen it kind of track lower than we knew about, 3 hours ago. So that's important to add here, and thank you for sharing that in advance, Melissa. Just going back in the mind, the support that we give to the historical society, that could come out and go into one of these other funds and be 50, 75, 100,000 positive for general fund, just by moving that allocation around and giving more from one of these CPV visitor enhancement from general fund for this this tourism manager role beyond 50.
And I do have, so right now, beyond any direct expenses incurred by the city, I have 50,000 for the tourism manager and then the UTV loader. So we have the allocation, direct expense, and the 50,000.
So would we feel okay with increasing that 50,000 to 75 or more for the tourism manager role? The current cost is listed at 150 to 165,000.
I'd be in for a third, using visitor enhancement, CPV, and general fund. And I think that strengthens our use of CPV funds, that it doesn't show everything's coming from there, but we are benefiting or dividing that cost amongst the entire municipality.
I would say half and half, visitor enhancement and I mean, it's right in the name of the title. It's tourism manager. It's like, this isn't something where we're trying to say, we've got a police officer who's working in the summer. So this is in the title. This is exactly what it's for. And I think we could, I can say that with a straight face, I don't see how the general fund has to be the source of funds for that. I mean, because the whole point of that position is people coming to town.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the mind we should always be looking to see if we can maximize the amount we can get from the CPV funds. I mean, in my mind, that's our money. This is the taxes taken from each cruise ship passenger, so we should be able to use it. Having said that, I understand we have to follow the rules, but from what I've understand from talking with people, that the cruise lines, they don't want us doing whale things or displays or whatever Juno did to cause that lawsuit, but they want us to be able to use this as much as possible. So, I mean, I'm in favor of anything as long as it passes the legal test of using more CPV funds, that's for sure. Just throwing that one out there.
And just to note what the final fully loaded, with all the benefits and everything for the tourism manager, we have 157.74.30.
Melissa, what's your feeling on half and half or a third? Do either of those scare you, caution you, go ahead on any of them?
I'm definitely more wary of using the CPV. I would feel visitor enhancement, there's no restrictions on. I would feel more comfortable with that one. I think it'd be easier to justify if it was not. If we kept it at 50, that's about a third of the total cost. And if we took the difference from visitor enhancement, I think that would be comfortable. It also might, kind of help. Hopefully that person will also be working on the independent traveler sector, so.
Since we're trying to reduce the general fund, that's our ultimate goal here. I'd say 50-50 in order to not, and whatever change that is, 75K for CPV, visitor enhancement, and the remainder could be general fund. I'm thinking there's something there if we need to make a motion or what.
Is that a
What
motion?
would we do? Yeah.
So I just want to be super clear so that I make sure I get everything in correctly. So you're thinking 75 from CPV and 75 from visitor enhancement? Okay, and those would be transfers out from each fund into the general fund. So that's how that would offset, and that would give you, the net difference there. You'd be knocking about 100,000 off of the deficit.
So if that's your motion, I'll second it.
Yeah,
I move to allocate 750,000 from CPV and 750,000 from Visitor Enhancement Fund to cover the salary of the tourism manager.
75,000, correct?
Oh.
Second.
Sick, yeah. Yeah, say half. Half and half. Half and half from visitor enhancement and CPV.
75,000 from CPV and 75,000 from Visitor Enhancement Fund to cover the tourism manager position.
I would make it half and half so that because there's little pennies on both sides.
Yeah, there are.
Half and half. Half and half.
Do we have a second?
Yeah.
It's been moved and seconded to fund the tourism manager 50% from CPV and 50% from visitor enhancement. Is there any public comment? Back to the assembly for deliberation.
I support that idea.
I don't not support it. It scares me a little bit more than 50,000, but
So
We'll see.
I'm just like, we're talking, this is our only time to talk about, why are you
Yeah.
scared about it? Or why are you concerned about it? Because of the fear of taking too much out of CPV and then the cruise lines.
without
Challenging
the proving up that this person will spend exactly half their time on cruise ship related functions, or this person moving away from cruise ship related functions in the future and not dealing with that, but us still funding it half from that, I think it potentially puts us in a spot where we could see some risk from that. I want to lower that risk level a little bit. That's more, I'm personally more comfortable, but I would be voting in favor of this motion.
Okay, that makes clear.
80%.
I'm still in support because I believe that it will not, it will be more than, they'll be spending probably more than 75, more than half of their time on cruise-related activities. That's just my personal opinion. So I will be voting yes, but I understand your concern and I recognize that.
Stephen, just wondering, are you thinking that because the tourism manager would be doing permits for vendors and then not directly of people disembarking? Is that where you see it? Like they're a tourism manager, but it's for the private entities to earn from the tourists, and that would be their gray area where it's not.
We just don't know exactly what this person's role and capacity is going to be yet. So if we have them only working 10% of the time on cruise passengers, that's a very extreme number, then we're paying this person out of CPV more than what they're actually dedicating to it. So right now, the assembly is essentially saying that this person will be 50% dedicated to cruise tourism. Now, if that changes in the future, it's not that we can't change those scales as well. But when you tell me that we're spending 50% of CPV on it, I'm saying that that person's time is going to be spent 50% on cruise tourism.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what, it's exactly that. We are currently at this moment defining this position. And we're limiting this position to certain things that we're saying this position is going to be working on by putting CPV funds in it. A third was one thing, half says we are defining this position as working with the cruise industry in some way, and therefore limiting what else we can ask this person to do. So, you know, I'm concerned about it. So I'm not comfortable voting for it at this point in time.
But the whole reason why we need the position is because of the increase in cruise ship tourism. And I think it's going to be significantly higher because that's the whole reason why we're doing it. I mean, I suspect it to be more like 80%. He's working on things that are a direct result of cruise ship traffic. And they, you know, I think the risk of this running afoul is really small. I mean, because it's like I said, right in the name. And you know, I can think of other things we've done that maybe didn't pass the sniff test as well as this. I mean, this is exactly the kind of thing that why that head tax exists.
Anything else from the assembly on the motion? Sarah?
All right, Mayor Eisenbeis,
No.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mr. Celine,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
and Mr. Pike.
No,
The motion passes 5-2.
So Melissa, you said that was a $100,000?
Yeah, just a
change?
bit over $100,000.
So we got about 140
140.
left.
Could I offer up two things that hits 140 almost dead on? The Granite Creek Gate and the V plow for the grader. I think those are wants, not needs. So we currently have gates in Granite Creek. They're just steel I-beam with cable, nothing fancy, but they work. They've been there for a long time. We've never had a V plow for any of our graders. I think that's kind of a want. It's a wish list thing. We are getting the box plow for the front end loader, which I think that is huge. I think that one's going to be a really useful piece of equipment, but the V plow on the grader, I'm just not sold on it. So, those are two things that I think could come off just because they're wants, not needs.
And I just want to echo that Ron did confirm with me tonight that that V plow is a want. It'd be great to have, but if something does need to be cut, he'd be more comfortable with that than some other items, so.
And Chris, I think I've been looking at that V plow too, and I'm I'm fighting two battles internally here. I'm fighting the first battle, that an accepted notion right now is a warmer climate, which means less snowfall. But I'm also on the other side, like when we get a little bit of snow, our citizens demand a high level of snow plowing. And we've been providing a pretty high level. It sounds like this will provide it a little bit more. But I've heard year over year, like we want exceptional snow removal. So I'm in with you on that one. I can agree with it, but that's the back and forth I've got.
I think they would get more utility out of the different plow blade for the front end loader. I was reading the description of the V plow blade, and that's exactly what the front end loader is going to be doing. That's going to be the one stacking them into the piles. I did a lot of the subcontracting for the city back in the day for schools and harbors with front end loaders. And if I had that plow that is currently for the front end loader that is suggested here, it would have saved so much time. It really great piece of equipment. So I think a lot of what that V plow is going to do is the front end loader blade will make up for that. So I think doing the front end loader blade, keep that in, but taking the V off. Because I think the front end loader is going to end up doing the job of the V plow.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I mean,
Yeah, this is not my exact wheelhouse. I mean, it all makes sense. I'd be in support of that.
and the fact of the matter is that if we're wrong, it's only, next year. I mean, it's not something we can't fix fairly easily if we're wrong.
Okay. So you want to make a motion, Chris?
Yeah. Do we just want to do it on the V plow or the gate as well?
I think those should be two separate motions.
Okay, make the motion to remove the V plow from. this
Second.
year's budget.
Trying to find the resource proposal there, but Sarah, does that give you the necessary information that you need? And okay, everybody understands what we're talking about when
Yeah.
we say V plow and the resource proposal. All right, it's been moved and seconded to remove the V plow from our resource proposals. Is there any public comment? Assembly deliberation? Sarah?
All right, on the motion to remove the resource proposal request for the V plow for the grader, Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeiß,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
and Mr. Celine.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0.
Melissa, that puts us at 100.
Yep.
Okay, I'll make the motion to remove the gate at Granite Creek.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to remove the resource proposal for a gate at Granite Creek. Is there any public comment? Assembly deliberation? I think Granite Creek was the one I was more in favor of than the Public Works gate because there's people there. And then the last guy out locks that one. So I don't know how I feel on this. I think both gates were on my chopping block, but I think this is maybe the one I liked better out of the two.
And before we pull this one, just let me double check that that one wasn't offset by public infrastructure sinking fund. If it was, it's going to have a zero impact to pull it. So just give me 1 sec here.
Perfect. John?
While Melissa's looking that up, I just want to explain, and I'm not arguing in support or against it. I just want to offer that reasoning on why that gate was thrown out there. We still have some investigating to do, but a lot of city-owned material disappears from that facility without being paid for. So it's not that I want to call anybody out on that yet, because like I said, we still have some investigating to do. This was an attempt to kind of mitigate that, but without the gate, again, it's not a high priority one. We can work on some better compliance measures to to track those things, but that was the intent of it.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think that gate has the most likelihood to be left open, especially when people are moving truckloads of material through, right? Like stopping every time is not gonna be real popular. So I think we're gonna have some compliance issues even with keeping that gate closed and people using their car to open it in the morning and close it at night. I think Ron offered cameras, right? He offered a few other options that we could do something to, make sure that we don't lose the materials that belong to the city, but I have a suspicion that, truck drivers are gonna open it once and leave it open until they're done, so.
And we do have this one funded with the Public Infrastructure Sinking Fund, so it's not going to impact our deficit.
Does that change anything on the motion?
Well, it definitely changed my overall goal. Still kind of stick with, we have gates there. They're not fancy, but it is definitely, you open it in the morning, it's open all day, and the last man out closes it. So, and I don't know how the new fancy gates would really work in that sort of operation out there. Yeah, all in all, I'm kind of torn on it, but a little bummed out it didn't achieve my goal.
Anything else from the assembly on the removal of Granite Creek Gate?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, can I ask one question?
Mm-hmm.
So the way it is right now, to clarify, it's an okay fence or gate or whatever. Most people just, someone opens it in the morning, they use it all day long, and then at the end of the day, somebody closes it, which means somewhere in all that time, people are just creeping in and picking up some rock or whatever it is. And so the new gate, would it still function the exact same way where you'd have to open? Because I think Tim or Stephen had said something which it makes sense. Even if it's a new one, it's going to be hard for people. They're busy, to open and close it every single time. A lot of times they just have a couple runs, so they just keep going, I don't know.
I'm just starting to think, we have 15 dump trucks maybe in this town. So is every dump truck that's gonna go and use the overburden site, which is up Granite Creek, are they gonna have to have a card to open and close it? I get, unless this gate is going somewhere else. I mean, I know where I know the pit that you're talking about that had material taken from, and that could be its own gated facility, but then you still have other sites that are open access, I guess. So I don't know. I guess I have more questions.
Steve, sorry for carrying this on, but Stephen, so why, you had said you preferred this to not lose this one. Why is that?
Because this one has less personnel on it on a daily basis, whereas Public Works Facility has a lot of people throughout the day.
Okay.
And I think it's much easier to secure that facility at night and leave it open during the day. My assumption is with the amount of people in there, it'd be more difficult to remove. I've also had a question if, the value of things taken, if you're spending $100,000 to stop $5,000 in theft, who really won there? So.
Okay, well, I thought I'm thinking about if it doesn't affect our income, or our bottom line, sorry, for the year, and it's just coming out of the infrastructure sinking fund. It seems like there's still questions here. What if we just vote this down and then get it in the budget, and then John and Ron and team can put a little more thought to it and think about it, maybe come back to the assembly. Doesn't hurt to do that. We can always not do it.
Because I want to pay for more road striping.
You can withdraw your motions too.
I like this, actually.
I'm sorry, Sarah?
I like the emotion, I should
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
I think it's gonna be a real pain in the butt to get in and out of there. And cameras, in my mind, if somebody's taking stuff out of there, they're using the same trucks, because they're not taking it out anything less than a dump truck. So I don't see how this really helps with that. And a camera would. And I think it would be a real pain, and so, if when this goes to a vote, I plan on voting for it, so. I mean, I can't vote gate, sorry. So.
Anything further from the assembly? Sarah?
All right, on the motion to remove the request for a security gate at Granite Creek, Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Celine,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
Mr. Mosher,
No,
and Mayor Eisenbeit.
Yes.
The motion passes 6-1.
It has been at least an hour, so we'll go ahead and take a break. We do. We got to find another $100,000, and I'm looking at 2 shipping containers right now for 50,000. But all that does is buy you more road striping. So I will bring that one up. Let's see, Public Works Central Garage is looking for 2 40-foot shipping containers with roll-up doors in order to store grounds maintenance, chemicals and treatments, as well as other equipment for buildings and ground maintenance. While I don't disagree that that would make it better, I think that they've been operating at a certain way for quite some time now, and could probably do without these $50,000 40-foot containers. It's page 32 for anyone looking at the resource proposals. So if anyone else would want to talk about that one. $50,000.
So is that 50,000 from the general fund, Melissa, or is there other money mixed in there?
And then if not that one, there are several vehicles where their sinking fund is incomplete and they're pulling from the general fund, delaying those a year or two. Still gets us the needed asset once the sinking fund is complete, but without a hit to the general fund.
Was that a motion on the 40-foot shipping container?
I'm just seeing if anyone wants to talk about it.
I'm
Page 32.
32 is the page number. It's 33 in the packet. Yeah.
The number, I was looking at the PDF. number.
Gotcha. Yeah, the PDF is 33 of 60 and the page number on it's 32.
As far as thoughts, my personal thought is that we're like for 50 grand, we're trying to just get to a theoretical balance, balanced budget. And it seems like 50,000 really isn't that much. So I would prefer not to, but if you feel passionately about it and the staff doesn't have a problem with it, then I would consider it.
And it is in the general fund and it's not offset by any revenue, so this one's safe to cut.
What's interesting about this one, it does say it could be scaled back to 1 container or a smaller container. So just from the language, it seems like it'd be a nice, but not a necessity. As what John said earlier about the nice to haves. This seems like a nice to have.
And I do feel kind of bad talking about Ron's stuff without Ron here. Hopefully he doesn't have an issue with that later, but.
Is this going to be one of those jokes where the staff says, don't ever miss a budget meeting?
John?
I'll be the first to say this is definitely a nice to have. It was going to be partnered up with some of the other equipment. So like the brining equipment, the chemicals can be stored in there, and with the side container with the roll up, they could pull the vehicle up, load up, and off they go. So the job can still be completed without this. This is more of a, I will say, an accessory to one of the other items.
I'm just kind of confused on how does a 40-footer cost 50 grand? Is that the roll-up door? Is it insulated? Is it a 9-foot high? Because they are more of a cost with insulated, and it just doesn't, just sitting here watching you guys, it doesn't make sense to me that it's 50 grand when you can get them for $5,000 and then AML will load it up and ship it up here for you. And you're just going to stow paint in it. Just saying.
Well, I was actually going to mention I just bought a 28-footer, 9-foot tall for $2,500 delivered. So, maybe we can scale her down to a used 40-footer for $4 grand. Just a
Boy,
thought.
so we could just we could cut this and then give that suggestion to Ron.
Yeah, if they need to come back, they can do a single container without a roll-up door, perhaps, to get it down to that 5,000-ish and a supplemental at some point. I'd make a motion to cut from the resource proposals, the two 40-foot shipping containers.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to remove two 40-foot shipping containers from the resource proposals. Is there any public comment? Assembly deliberation? Sarah?
All right, on the motion to cut the resource proposal request for the two 40-foot shipping containers, Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Celine,
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbais,
Yes.
and Mr. Christensen.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
So can I throw one out? I'd like to look at cutting the body cameras.
I was just
Um,
gonna say that one as well, and this
no,
guy's here to defend it.
No, in my, I read the news a lot. And they don't seem to work that well for anybody. The other thought on this is the kind of thing that we can often get grants for. It's popular right now. So I think there's a distinct possibility that the chief will come up to us and say, I've got some sort of a COPS grant. I know that's an actual grant, so probably not that one. To get this down the road. But the more I read about these, I mean, it just seems like more often than not, it's that they're ambiguous and they don't really do much good. I think ambiguous or ambivalent was this chief's take on these. And I don't see him helping morale much. If somebody was willing to give them to us, I'd be willing to give them a try, but I wouldn't have real high hopes. So I wouldn't have a problem dropping this for now. And, if something pops up or if we, down the road decide they really do work better or the technology improves, fine. Or we just buy the Google glasses for all the cops, be cheaper. But I wouldn't have, so I'll make the motion. It sounds like what we're saying. So I move that we remove the body cameras for resource proposal from the budget.
Second. It's been moved and seconded to remove body cams from the resource proposals. Is there any public comment? Back to the assembly for deliberation.
I have a
Tim?
question for Melissa. So, do we have any number on, like, do we get a decrease in our liability insurance if we have body cameras? Is there anything that we know about
Nope.
that?
Won't impact that whatsoever.
Yeah, that was an important feature, so thank you. Just want to make it clear that this isn't because the assembly cares less about transparency or anything there. It's just a understanding of budget and the final stretch here.
Yeah, I will say, I'm glad that you said that, JJ, because I'm sure there's people who might, some people could possibly come to that conclusion, and that is very much not the case. Yeah, our police chief has mentioned when we brought him up last time that he was kind of, yeah, I don't know, ambivalent is a good word. It's hard to find the word, but I don't think he had strong feelings either way. So I would prefer to keep them, but I understand. And I do agree with Tor that this is the kind of thing you sometimes would see like a grant for, because I remember there's other things, supplies that the chief has brought before that we've been able to get grants for. So I guess I'm undecided yet, but that's definitely a valid thought.
I guess I do have a question for John or Chief Beatty. Is this something, we keep saying, implying that this is something that we might see a grant for? Are there grants that we could go after for body cams? Okay. Well, yeah, if you want to come up.
Good evening. The answer is yes.
Short and sweet. I love it. You know, I think with that, I would be willing to take this off the general fund and look for granting opportunities. It is something I think I would like to see on the force eventually. You know, I noticed our park rangers have body cams, but yet our PD doesn't. So that kind of struck me when I saw that. But yeah, I'm willing to take this off the general fund, but I'd like to pursue granting opportunities if something ever comes forward.
Once you have capacity to do as such. I'd like a full police department first.
We're doing pretty good on that measure too.
But in all fairness, do you think that's something you could pursue?
There are grant opportunities. I think there's a strong possibility. If they put it out and we see it, I think it would be a very strong possibility we can get it.
Okay, thank you.
I think we can probably do a little bit better. I'm willing to offer an amendment indicating that the chief will actively seek grants, I mean, as a part of this. So if we're going to cancel this, add that. So.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of that, but I don't know if that, how does that work, Sarah?
It's an amendment to the motion.
Yeah, you need to make a
I
motion to
I
amend
think
it.
it'd have to be, I think it would have to be separate because we're mixing money and things not money. I mean, I don't care. If you want to make it a friendly amendment and it's kosher, it's fine with me.
That's what I was asking. It seems like we're mixing funds with a.
You are. I mean, you're not really amending the main motion.
Could we do a friendly amendment then?
No, there is no friendly.
Okay. What if we did an amendment and we discussed it and voted yes? I mean, is that okay with the rules, Robert's rules?
I would vote on this and, well, I mean, you're not really, an amendment is, you're not amending the resource proposal. I mean, you're not.
I also think that
amending
we
it.
have our administrator and our chief administrator in front of us that have gotten a message pretty loud and clear. I personally am comfortable with that and I'm comfortable following up with that. However, if Tim is not, then we could also make a motion after this. It sounds like it's cleaner for Sarah.
I'm fine with that. I just, I mean, I don't think it would be, I would be remiss of us, I think, not to be on the record saying we're interested in this, right? So at least that's where I'm stand on this. So, indicating an active seek for grants is different than saying, hey, go find some grants. I think that's kind of where I'm standing on that. If this messes up an appropriation, then we'll find a different way to do it. But on the record of saying we're interested in body cameras down the road, I think that would be a statement that would relieve us of we want it out of the general fund, but we're still interested in that is different than, hey, we just don't want to spend money on this.
Sorry, I've just been baiting.
So, I mean, with
You go
chief,
ahead.
when you say you will look for grants.
I will look for grants. Police grants tend to be seasonal, usually the first part of spring and late part of the summer, August, September. So I will continue to look for that kind of grant opportunity.
So I think everybody, pretty most of the assembly is in favor of getting rid of these. I think I'm gonna vote no, because I think there's something to be said for body cams. A lot of departments are moving towards it, and I think that it could be a huge benefit to the police department, but and the jury's not in on that yet, I don't think, but I think there's been positive things about it that have helped individuals and communities. So I'm going to vote for no for this.
Anything else on the motion? Thank you, Chief. Sarah?
All right, on the motion to remove the resource proposal request for body cams, Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mr. Mosier,
No.
Mayor Eisenbeiß,
Yes.
Mr. Celine,
No.
Ms. Carlson,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
and Mr. Yested.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-2.
Melissa, that puts us at a 70K surplus. Do we still want to talk about vehicles? I think the only reason I'm on that train, just so the assembly's aware, I believe that the sinking fund is in place to fully pay for that vehicle. If you don't have a sinking fund, you either need to increase your contribution to or wait until that sinking fund is fully vetted. So that's the only reason I've been going down that. JJ, I still keep thinking in my head about Historical Society and funding from visitor enhancement. I really like your train of thought on that. That might be a future study and something I look into. So good work on that one.
I guess, vehicles are sort of a double-edged sword. You're gonna pay for it one way or the other. So the longer we keep a vehicle around, the more likely we are gonna have to spend money on it. And, you know, I'm not sure we're saving as much money as we think we are. I do believe you still have a warranty with the new ones, so, you know, there's some benefits to that too. So, you know, I think I would be more hesitant, just because the costs go up dramatically the older the vehicle is, and they're not little costs generally. So I think we could, you know, this is sort of the, you know, problem of not spending money, not wisely.
I don't have any particular vehicle that I'm looking at, but I do, a big part of my job is buying them. And talking to folks and looking into the money on that. And it actually rarely, even if you're working on a vehicle a lot, is it costing you more than the payments on a new car. So if it's more a question of time for the guys out there, that's a little different. But as vehicle has to be pretty bad before you're spending more on it than the payments for a new vehicle, even if you've got a great interest rate or something. You know, if you think of it in those terms, even if you have a 0% loan, you're still looking at, you know, $800-900 a month for most vehicles. And rarely does anybody spend that much even if you're having it done in foreign auto, which we're not. So, you know, I think a 15-year lifespan for most of our vehicles is what we shoot for, is probably a little, I mean, I know we do, is probably a little short. So just in general, I'm not necessarily advocating for everyone, but I think that we used to give the oldest ones to the administrator to drive for years. And I think that, you know, that might work. You know, instead of giving them a raise, we give them the old cop cars. And that's exactly what we did, by the way.
I'll run again if I can have a cop car. So on the break, I was talking with our administrator about striping streets. Melissa, I'm going to refer to the resource proposal for contracted services for striping and gravel or paving. That's on page number 22. Does that one come from infrastructure sinking or general fund?
That one is coming from the infrastructure sinking fund.
Okay, so I was talking with the administrator at our break. I think there's a lot of road striping needs in town right now. Just about every municipal parking lot. Edgecombe Drive, I've been driving up it for a while. I'm really still not sure if I'm driving on the road or not. I don't live there, so it kind of scares me where I'm driving. There are multiple other streets, I think, as well that are in need of some good striping. In the discussion, you know, we can pull some money later from infrastructure sinking fund. It's a little bit more complicated of a process. What I would be in favor of doing tonight is increasing this resource proposal, perhaps by $100,000, to ensure that we can get our road striping done, as it's a pretty straightforward way right now to pull that money out of infrastructure sinking fund. And then our administrator will understand that the intent of that extra money is to get as much striping done as we can. John, I don't know if that works within this resource proposal. But the intent is to get more striping done as much as we can this season. Is it working for you how it's playing out in my head? Or do I need to, is there a different way that you'd prefer to do that? Because it does say it's for contracted services. And I think we'll probably be running our crew about as much as we can on some of the larger streets.
The mechanics of it makes sense. It's a matter of if we can get the contractors to do it, and we have the capacity to do it. But the mechanics of moving the money is fine.
So I'd make a motion then to increase the contracted services for striping and pothole repair to 450,000
Second.
from 350. It's been moved and seconded to increase contracted services from 350 to 450,000. Is there any public comment? Assembly deliberation? And I guess, John, for some direction on that, I would favor striping first as a public safety issue. And then I would say that potholes are well within that as well. So if we do have some potholes that can be filled with that extra money coming out of the Public Infrastructure Sinking Fund, then I'm okay with that as well. And if anyone disagrees with what I'm saying, please let John know. JJ.
I just had a question for Melissa. Where does this put us total?
This will have a net zero impact. This would have another transfer in from the Public Infrastructure Sinking Fund and then an increased appropriation. So we'll still be at 70 in the black.
I don't disagree. So I agree with what you said, Stephen. I'm glad you did it. Having the striping isn't something that you think about much, but they almost don't exist in some places. Plus the potholes are getting atrocious, and until we can build up some of these projects started, they take time to get planned and stuff. We need to fill those potholes. So thank you for bringing it up.
Anything else from the assembly? Sarah?
All right, on the motion to increase contracted services, in the streets division, that resource proposal request from 350,000 to 450,000. Mr. Mosier,
Yes.
Mr. Pike,
Yes.
Mr. Yestad,
Yes.
Mr. Christensen,
Yes.
Mr. Celine.
Yes.
Mayor Eisenbeis,
Yes.
and Ms. Carlson.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
See, there you guys go. I'm not all about cutting. I added 2. Is there anything else? That kind of wraps it up for me. I fortunately didn't have to go after Melissa's staff accountant. I think I would have gotten a pen thrown at me from over there. But that wraps it up for me. I feel pretty comfortable with this as we start to move forward. But I don't know if there's anything else that anyone, additions, subtractions, anything they've heard from the community that we've been missing on this budget.
The only thing I would say is that I think we've heard loud and clear about the pool, which I think there's agreement on. And it's really fortunate to be able to do that. And it's also nice to be able to support what's going on at the PAC. So thank you everyone for supporting that.
And I also want to say thank you to the Assembly for putting forward a budget with a surplus. I didn't think that was going to happen tonight. Honestly, I came in thinking we were going to pass a $200,000 or so deficit budget. And that was kind of where we were going to sit. So this feels a whole lot better to me. It's still a big budget. It's still interesting to have such a big budget, but I do thank I thank everybody for working together on this, even with the split votes. I love split votes because it means we're all representing somebody. But I appreciate the Assembly for coming together to have a surplus budget in this instance. That means a lot to me. Is there anything else on the general fund, enterprise funds, internal service funds, or special revenue funds before? Tim?
So I just have a timing question. So I read through your timing for when the budget will be generated and so forth. And what is the impact of the school district deciding to delay delivering the budget to us till May 8th?
I think because we've had such a good back and forth, and after this meeting, we'll be ready to tell the school district exactly what we're funding, so that's going to be, pretty much in stone. We will, we'll let them know right away, and then we'll have their budget May 1st. And, just make sure everything is aligned. And then, so it really should be fine.
So I have sat in on a few of the school board work sessions, and there continues to be conversation about if there's a BSA increase, they'd be coming back to the assembly for an increase in funding. And that's nowhere in this budget that I can see. So what, is there some thought as to where that might happen if it needed to happen? Or is it just a straight, this is what we're doing and that's it? I guess that's a question, and probably a point of clarity that we're going to want to have with the school board. And then I had another question. So are we taking some of the 1% school maintenance fund to pay for the transfer of the maintenance workers over to the city? Is that in the budget?
400.
So, so the school district could have just kept that money and done the same thing? Is that what you're saying? I mean, and can they now pay the one person that's left over there out of that same fund? Is that something that they would need to know? That they could take that money to do that if that's how maintenance?
I mean, I think it has to be pretty directly tied to actual maintenance of the school buildings, which is why I was not at all comfortable covering the whole amount. But
Is that an ongoing expectation that 1% will pay for these maintenance workers?
I think a portion, it's really up to the assembly. And the general direction that I was hearing from the assembly was to go that direction.
So they're keeping one liaison person over there. Is that correct? Would that be reasonable they could take the part of the 1% to spend for that person? Since that person is directly related to maintenance and particularly liaising with the city?
I think that one's sticky because it's an employee of another organization with the city's payroll basically covering it. That I'm not sure. I don't have an answer for that one, but it raises some flags for me.
I think for me, the flags are raised around where it would fall in terms of being educational versus non-educational. So we'd have to dig in there. I'm not certain how the school district has divvied up, because we don't say, we don't tell exactly how to spend that big pool. And so the school district has always done that. So I don't know if the maintenance is, or a portion of the maintenance is considered educational. So there could be issues around that.
Or do we need to give them an answer on this?
I think we need more discussion and probably running things by legal too.
Well, they're looking for any penny they can find, so.
Well, so my thought on that is, I do think we should fund the schools as much as we can, but because of the lateness of the time, and we have to, I mean, we're literally just wrapping this up right now. Your points are very valid, and I hadn't thought about it that way. If we're taking a big portion or a certain portion of that money from the 1%, then yeah, they could just keep it. But my philosophy on this is that we're also taking ownership of these buildings, and that has an implied responsibility. And so we're making an agreement long-term to cover that. And so I think that if the school comes back for more money, we can talk about then. But I think we've got a well-rounded budget for now. I think we should pass, this is my opinion, pass it now. And if they come back for more money, we can talk about it then.
And for clarity's sake, I am in favor of the city taking over this school maintenance. That's not the question here. The question is, my question all along has been making sure that everybody understands exactly who's responsible and where this money's going. 'Cause that's a lot of money and there's a lot of room for argument on that, so.
Yeah, no, and I agree 100% with that. That's something that maybe, John, the next couple months, we could have a work session or something like that or two, and we can kind of talk about this, maybe a work session with the school district. I don't know. It seems like what Tim has said is really important because it's fine now, but 10 years from now, that's a lot of money to be without clarity. So I think clarity would be very helpful.
And I don't recall, perhaps it was a meeting I was gone for, but is the assembly as a whole in favor of using some of the proceeds from the 1% to pay for personnel? Because that makes me uneasy.
The whole, I mean, it's all, in my mind, yeah, I don't have a problem with it because in theory, at least, it would prevent us from having to do some of these other projects. I mean, or at least slow them down or make them last longer. It's all the same picture. And, the only other option would be to contract it out and pay the contractor, which would cost us more. So, I mean, I hear you. When I first saw that and I noticed it last meeting or a couple meetings ago that was the plan, and I thought, well, okay. I mean, it's all maintenance, it's all upkeep, it's all, I know that the thought was to build money for bonds or for replacing buildings or heat pumps or whatever, but again, if it stops us from having to buy heat pumps or whatever, it's doing its job. And that's the job of it. And let's face it, maintenance is people. And so I thought about it a bit and I said, okay, it's the same goal. So.
I am comfortable to a point, and that's where I think that the percentage is what we're talking about. When I was saying that John and Melissa, that we need to come up with, I think we all agree, we need to, like, as Tim has suggested, we need clarity. I think we should come up with a percentage that would be agreeable, that would be part of the understanding and agreement moving forward. I'm not sure I feel comfortable making any huge changes to the budget at this late date. I'm committed to having the city take over the schools, and I believe a portion of it should be paid for or could be paid for out of that additional 1%. The percentage is up for discussion.
Melissa, can you remind me how much that's estimated to bring in annually?
Yes,
Closest 100,000 is okay.
I think 2.5 million.
And refresh our memory again, how much are we taking from that to the?
400.
400.
I feel very comfortable with that. I think that's plenty. I think Tim's point is very timely because if we just start paying all of it over and over again out of maintenance, then we're never going to have any money to take out bonds to have a school or repair schools. But I don't have my calculator later open here, but 400,000 of that couple million, I'm okay with that. But so this is where my mind, we pass the budget as it's been written, and we have another discussion at a later date to decide some sort of policy that could be written and approved by the assembly that would hard stop a certain percentage. That's just a thought.
I will stop after this one. This is sort of like the tourism manager in a way though, right? So if we take the 1% to pay for these maintenance workers, they're not going to be available to work on city buildings, right? Because this 1% was for the voters was to work on school buildings. So if we're paying their wages, they're only going to be working on school stuff, right? I mean,
Well,
so I
it's
think
not,
that's, I'm just saying, this is what the voters voted on. They said this is for school maintenance, and I thought, if we wanted to bring them in-house to increase the maintenance ability of the city, which I've heard us talk about up here, this particular funding source is gonna limit that ability, certainly, in terms of meeting the stipulations of where this money came from.
And we do have in the models, the allocation does not have them 100%. So the 400 is not just for personnel, it's just to offset the overall cost. But all of our assumptions don't, assume, just to be safe, that we have other funds and departments chipping in to pay for them as well.
and Tim, to clarify, my intention is, yes, the same number of full-time people working on it, but we may find, the whole thought was we could find synergies. Some people from the city might be working on school buildings, some from who formerly from the school could be working on city buildings. But the point is, we would have the same people hours working on school buildings, so that wouldn't be shortchanging the school at all. That's my intention, at least.
But his point is extremely valid of where the money comes from. If it comes from a school maintenance fund, I don't want those hours used for Centennial Hall maintenance, I think. And I'm just hoping, I'm a little more comfortable going forward, understanding that it's 400,000 out of 2.5. If it was 400,000 out of $1 million, we'd be looking for some more cuts tonight, because we'd be reshifting this. I think the fund will continue to grow. Well, the fund will probably get expended for the first few years rather rapidly, but then it'll start to grow. I would also hope, John, as we go forward, we reevaluate exactly how many staff members are needed to maintain the buildings. Hopefully we can get them to a point of high maintenance where they're not needing much staff, and we can cut that back down. Because I'm still of the pretty firm belief that the money should be used for nuts and bolts more so than the people working on them. However, I understand you need a person to screw the nuts and bolts. So
Yeah.
it's I'm fine with it for now. It's an area that I will be paying attention to as we go forward, I think.
Sorry, I'll say one more comment on that. So it's 1 million, you said?
I
Annually?
think we have it budgeted around 2.4.
Okay, 2.4. So that's less than 20%. I think, I feel comfortable with that, using that much, or 20% towards maintenance, sort staffing. And I do agree with everything you guys are saying. Sorry, I'm just trying to provide a little clarity from my point of view. Thank you.
To kind of circle back to one of the earlier things Tim was talking about, like, if the BSA does increase, does this body want to continue to fund the cap? And if that, I mean, we have 80,000 to work with now, what is a potential, as far as the room knows, BSA increase? And should we try to cut something else to allow potential room for potential funding to the cap?
Melissa, do you remember what that gap was at 680? What the difference in cap would have been if they funded BSA at 680? I know that's really off the wall, but
Yeah,
I thought we had a number at one point.
I think we did. I don't remember.
Okay, thank you.
It was about 425.
I mean, the numbers, what I'm hearing out of Juneau, I would feel pretty comfortable going to Vegas saying that ain't happening. They're talking about a one-time that won't affect the cap. And I mean, it won't be part of the BSA, so. And I think anything that actually raises the cap, I don't think can get through the governor, so. In my mind, I'm not gonna fight it out over something that has an extremely small likelihood of happening.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure we said that, and like we're doing what we can to fund the schools, and we would do more if we could do more.
From my point of view, I would consider finding some money for that, but given, I agree with Tor on that. I don't think, I'm not holding much faith in the governor doing that or allowing that. But should it happen, I mean, I still believe we need to pass this because we're running up on a hard deadline. And then if they come back, we'll address the situation as it is.
We got a whole month of May with Thursdays. We got lots of time for budget meetings. Did we all notice how Melissa didn't laugh? Is there anything else that the assembly would like to take up on tonight on the budget? Without anything else, then we would be moving on to the last persons to be heard, and we'd be ending the meeting tonight, so.
We did have one other slide if we want to discuss anything further on visitor enhancement.
I personally am not ready to talk about that one this evening. It's my understanding that there is time, and that's kind of why I put out multiple calls to the assembly to see if it was something they wanted to tackle this evening.
I would prefer to wait. We did a lot of hashing out of things tonight, and we have a little time, as you pointed out, so I prefer to wait.
Kind of like the last time we meeting, I want to talk about this at length. No. That's the point. And if we talk about it tonight, I know I've got some family issues that minor emergency that I gotta have to get out of here, and I want to talk about this. So I think we need to push it off to another meeting.
Anything else on the budget at all in general? Any part of it?
One thing that's bugging me is the $5,000 to lift the heat pumps and then the $50,000 for the van that we vetoed. Not enough information for me, and it puts my hackles up.
On the resource proposals?
Just to say,
$5,000, if it's every heat pump we got, you know, to raise it up so that the ricochet rain doesn't trash the coils like at Blatchley or whatever, but the $5,000 even number doesn't make sense to me as a refrigeration guy. And then $50,000 for the roll-up door on the van. I'm just making a general comment that I got to look at it.
Okay. Anything else from the assembly this evening? Seeing none, that will end item A. We'll be moving on to persons to be heard. This is public participation for any item on or off tonight's agenda, not to exceed 3 minutes for any individual.
I would like to speak.
Yes, please.
Hi, good evening, Assembly. This is Rachel Roy, the Director of the Chamber and Visit Sitka. And I've been on the line during this whole time. I'm actually dialing in remotely, but I just want to commend you for the really cohesive discussion tonight. It was really great to hear how it went and all the work that went into this budget. I did present, or I put together additional information from our conversation and presented you with a comprehensive budget that laid out the base contract with supplemental amounts, suggested fund spending from the CPV fund, and then descriptions of where that or what that fund could help cover. And speaking with Travel Juno, who has kind of set the precedent for spending with the CPV, there is I think there's a really good opportunity for us to shift some of those expenses into that fund. And I was hoping to help answer any questions that you guys might have. I did hear from JJ, but I haven't heard from anyone else. So, Tor or, anyone else that has any questions or things that you'd like to talk, please send me an email and we can schedule the time to talk. And yeah, it would be great. I will look forward to hearing from the team on when the meeting is rescheduled. Thank you.
Is there any other persons to be heard this evening? Seeing none, that would bring us to adjournment.
I move to, second.
All those in favor say aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Thank you, everybody, for your time, especially staff who came out for the budget meeting.